Hello everyone, welcome to Teams Nation. My name is Tom Morgan and we're going to be talking about Teams B2C in a session. So let's start off a little bit by talking about Teams because, I mean, look, Teams is great, isn't it? We've had a couple of years of Teams, we all love Teams, we've all got warm, fuzzy feelings about Teams. This is a Teams conference, what's not to like, right? There's so much happening with Teams at the moment. And it's Teams' 5th birthday, so lots of fun things happening with Teams. And we can't forget, obviously, in January as well, Teams topped 270 million monthly active users. So all in all, I think it's fair to say Teams is probably feeling pretty good right now, you know. And if you're in Teams, like, yeah, we're on the Teams bandwagon. We all use Teams. We don't like any of that Zoom stuff. Teams is great because really, I mean, Teams has helped so many people as well. And over the past couple of years, we've really become reliant on it. You know, Teams is where we go now for really high quality. It's where we go for like massive scale. It's where we go for our great voice and video capabilities, our awesome meetings and calling experiences. I mean, what is not to like? You know, we've got so much to thank Teams for, right? Well, hang on a minute. What's that you say? Teams actually isn't doing all of that stuff, all of that calls and meeting stuff. There's something else going on as well. Well, what is going on? If it's not Teams doing it, well, actually, what is it that's doing it? Turns out a lot of the capabilities in Teams, especially around meetings and calling, are not done by Teams at all. They're done by something you quite possibly have never heard of. Called IC3. This is the Intelligent Conversation and Communications Cloud. Now, that would by itself not be very interesting, right? It's like, okay, fine, it's just another name for something that happens in Teams that does the calling and meeting, and why do I care? Well, by itself, that would be true. The thing is, a few years ago, inside Microsoft, this was before the pandemic, actually, Microsoft thought, actually, we should take this big IC3 thing, this big platform for doing real-time calling and meetings that, you know, we put together, we put a lot of effort into, and that Teams is making such good use of. We should take that and we should put an API on it and we should release it so developers everywhere can build that same functionality into their own services, into their own products. And that's exactly what they've done. They created an API for this IC3 functionality, for this substrate, if you like, of functionality. And that is available to developers everywhere. And that is the thing that is called Azure Communication Services. And it sort of looks like this. You've got this platform along the bottom that powers communication and collaboration. It powers meetings, it powers calling. Teams lives on top of it. And whenever you do a meeting or a call, this call is happening on that IC3 platform. Other Microsoft services use this as well. So you've seen Dynamics 365 video, you've seen LinkedIn video. Both of those use the IC3 platform, that same platform for doing meetings and calling under the hood. And then your own application that you build can sit on top of ACS, Azure Communication Services, which is a set of APIs developers can use to tap in to that same functionality. And it gives them voice over IP, it gives them a persistent chat service, it gives them capabilities such as audio, video, screen sharing, lots and lots of other things. Now, by itself, that's pretty cool. But what makes it even nicer is that the ACS team have implemented some clever interop stuff within kind of the interplay that happens with Teams, because Teams meetings and calls that happen on Teams are really happening in ACS on that IC3 platform. The team have made it so that your application over here on the right-hand side through ACS can go and join a Teams meeting. I'll say that again. Your code running ACS, so you could have a voice over IP chat experience. It can live in a web page somewhere. It doesn't need to have Teams, doesn't need a plugin. It's all done with WebRTC. That's the power of ACS. You've got this big platform underneath, but you can join those users into a Teams meeting with people from your organization who are happy using Teams and are happier using Teams because they use Teams every day. And that, for me, is a really big opportunity. I think it's a huge opportunity for B2C scenarios, the ability to extend teams outside the organization and bring users into your business process. So that's interesting, but you probably didn't come here for me to give you pithy quotes on the screen for you to screenshot and put on Twitter, so it looks like you're paying attention, although if you'd like to do that, that's great. What you actually came here for is for me to stop talking about the opportunity and actually start showing you how to do it, how to take advantage of it, how to build something. And that is exactly what we're going to spend the rest of this session doing. So the goal of this session is we're going to build a customer web portal for doing video calls. Those calls, when they happen, are going to use Microsoft Teams under the hood, and we're going to create Microsoft Teams meetings that you can join in Teams. We are going to write as little code as possible, as we possibly can, and we're going to try and take around 20 minutes doing it. So that's sort of the plan. Now, I say write as little code as possible. What do I mean by that? I mean, we're going to use low code where we can. We're going to use minimal code where we can. There are going to be bits, especially around the web portal side, where we are going to have to write code. I'm going to try and keep it as high level as possible, and I'm going to try and keep it as generic web code as possible. So we're going to be using React in Visual Studio Code, and I'm not going to do anything that is super specific to ACS or Teams. So any generalist web developer could pick this up. So if you've got people, if you're not a developer, but you've got a development team of generalists, of web developers, they will be able to do this. They'll be able to use this because there are some really cool building blocks that we can take advantage of. Okay, so how are we going to do this? How are we going to achieve this goal in the next 18 minutes? So let's have a mini design workshop. So you're going to get quite a lot in this session. So let's start off with a bit of a design. So let's look at some building blocks. So these are tools that we can use and pull together to build our solution. So the first one I've been talking about. So the fact that we can take ACS functionality and we can join it into a Teams meeting. That's a big one. That's an important one. So we'll start there. That's a good one. Next up. So ACS has React UI components. What does that mean? So React is a web technology for building web pages, and you can create what are called UI components. So they're like wrapped up, composable bits of functionality that you can drop into your code. And the ACS team have made a whole bunch of these for the UI of making and receiving video calls. So if you want to drop in a little control to do a participant list, you can do that. If you want for a video pane, you can do that. If you want the buttons, you can do that. If you don't really care how it looks, they also have what are called composite controls, which are where they take all of their controls and they wrap them all up into one big control, and they call it a big video calling experience. And that's the thing that you can drop in. And by doing that, you instantly get an entire video experience without having to do any work. We're going to use that today because we don't have loads and loads of time, but you could also build up the individual UI components to create your own thing if you didn't like the way theirs looked. Right, something else worth knowing, a tool in the kit. You can use Power Automate flows to create a Teams meeting. So this is useful because we need to be able to do this. So when our customer shows up to our website and wants to talk with us, we're going to create dynamically a new Teams meeting. And then we're going to take that customer and put it in that Teams meeting. Okay, so knowing that we can use Power Automate to create a Teams meeting is handy. The other thing Power Automate can do is post into a Teams channel. So once we've created our Teams meeting, we can tell everyone in the company or anyone who needs to know inside the company that some customer has just shown up and wants to do a video call. So we can post into a Teams channel to make that happen. And then finally, what we haven't really spoken about in ACS is identity, because one of the nice things about ACS is that it's not like Teams, where every Teams user has to have an identity. They need to be signed in with Azure AD, and they need to be licensed and all that sort of stuff. ACS has a much more lightweight model. You need to provide something for your ACS code to use. So your ACS code needs to have an access token in order to use ACS. Generating that access token is something your API can do. And it requires a user identity, but a user identity, when you create one, is really, really lightweight. It's basically just a GUID, and you can throw them away when you've finished using them if you want, or you can store them and reuse them. It's sort of up to you. So we can build a very nice sort of lightweight thing where people showing up to the web page get given an identity, get given an access token, and then we can drop them straight into that call. So here's the plan. First thing is we're going to have a user on a web page. They decide that they're going to have a call and they click some button to say, I want to have a call. When that happens, we are going to have our website make an HTTP request call to a Power Automate flow that we've created, because you can do that in Power Automate flow. You can say trigger this flow when the flow gets an HTTP request. And that's a nice way for our website to call Power Automate flow to kind of start the process. We can have flow create the Teams meeting and post that message into the channel with the meeting link so everyone inside the organization can join. Then we can send that meeting information back to the web page. So the web page now knows which meeting it needs to join. We can then have that web page make another HTTP request. This time, we need to go and get the identity. So we can build a lightweight Azure function that will generate our user and generate our identity and give it back to us. And again, that's something our web page can call. And when it gets that information back, then it will have both the meeting link and the identity, which is everything it needs to get going. And so when we've got that, then we can just use the built-in, like the ACS UI components to make it very easy to then join that user into that meeting that we've created. And that will be a nice end-to-end kind of flow, nice end-to-end experience, meaning that we can do some success and celebration when we're finished. Okay. Before I start doing this, here's a massive disclaimer. If we're going to build this solution in 20 minutes, we're going to leave out quite a lot. Okay. There's no security, there's no restrictions. When you build this, I'm going to give you the code at the end. Please don't just put it on your website without thinking about it, because the code we are going to build means that anyone can show up to your website, click a button, start a Teams meeting, create a Teams meeting actually in your environment, and then join it. And so potentially anybody could do that and create video calls all day. And guess what? You will pay the cost in Azure, not me. So there's your disclaimer. Now we've done that. Let's go. So I'm going to do this in a particular order to keep it kind of interesting. So let's start with Visual Studio Code. And I said I was going to build something from scratch, and I do kind of really mean that. So I'm going to start by creating a basic React app. Now, if you've done anything in React, you'll be familiar with this. You start by creating a scaffold, basically it's like a hello world for building a React app. So that's what I'm going to do. This takes a bit of time, so I'm going to start the process going now, and then we're going to come back and look at it when it's finished. But I wanted you to see that I'm not starting with something and just adding to it. I am literally starting from nothing, and we'll be able to see that when this finishes building. So I'm going to let that do its thing because it's going to take quite a long time. Whilst it's doing that, let's go and build out the Power Automate flow that we need in order to go and create our meeting. So let's do that. So I'm in Power Automate. Let's go and create a new flow. We're going to create an instant cloud flow because we want it to happen instantly. And the trigger that we are going to use for this is when an HTTP request is received. So let's create one of those. The first thing we want to do when we've received this HTTP request is go and create a Teams meeting. So in Teams, we can go down here, and if I can find it, which I never can, did I go straight past it? There we are. We're going to create a Teams meeting. Okay, I'm going to pop it in my calendar as well. I'm going to create a subject, say new web meeting. There's something in the body. There's a customer. How exciting! Let's do the one true time zone. Start time. I'm going to write an expression just to say let's just do now, and then the end time we'll do an hour from now. Is it hours? I can never remember. Oh, make it an expression. Hours. Let's add 1 to that to make it an hour long. I'm going to add myself to the list of required attendees. This is quite a nice touch because when the meeting starts, I'm going to get a pop-up then because I'm a required attendee in the meeting. So it's actually quite a nice additional touch we could do. So that's going to create the meeting. The next thing we need to do is post about that meeting in a channel. So let's do that. There's a few different ways I could do this. I'm just going to do like a basic post into the channel as the flow bot. And I'm going to post it into a channel. I've already got a channel I've created here called Customer Web Meetings. Okay, so I'm going to put it in this channel here. So let me choose that one. Teams Nation, choose a channel. There we go. And so I'm going to say you have a meeting, and then I'm going to include I'm going to include the join link. So from the create Teams meeting flow object item action, you can find the join URL. So I'm going to do that, post the join URL, and then the last thing we need to do is make sure we return this same join URL back to whatever is calling this HTTP thing, because that's how we're going to get it back to the website. So somewhere in here, there's a thing called response. So I'm going to return a 200 response. In the body, I'm going to return JSON because it's going to make it easier to use later. And I'm going to return the join link, and then where's that join URL gone? I can't see. There it is. Okay, let's save that, see if we've messed anything up. All right, cool. So that's created. We can test it now. So up here in the response, we get this URL. We can call this URL. So let me copy that. Let me go into Postman. If you haven't used Postman, don't worry. It's just a thing for making it easy to do HTTP requests. So we can, is it a post or a get? I can't remember. I think it's a post. And we can call it. What we should get back is a URL of a meeting that's just been created. So that's nice. We've got that. And then also, if I go and have a look in our team, we've got a new message here that says you've got a meeting, join it here. So we know we've created a meeting. We can go and send it back. We've got a nice thing we can call now. We'll generate a meeting, put it in a channel, and give us back the URL. So that's a great start. Let's go back and have a look at our app now and see how that's getting on. Perfect. So that's finished. So that's good. So we can now go into that. Let me just show you what this looks like before we do anything, because this is exactly as it comes out of the box. You get like a basic sort of app that looks, if you've done anything with React, done any courses or anything like that, you'll probably be familiar with this page when it pops up. It looks just like that, right? So this is kind of empty. It's ready to go. So let's close that. And the next thing we need to do that's going to take a little bit of time is add some packages. We're going to add some NPM packages for this to make it easier. We're going to bring in some functionality from the React libraries because we need to be able to, from the ACS, the Azure Communication Services libraries, to be able to kind of work with them. And the first one, and the one that takes all the time, is this one. So I'm going to kick this one off now, this Azure Communication React one. And then whilst that's happening, I'm just going to have a drink of water, and we're going to talk about the identity Azure function. Okay, so whilst this is happening, let's go and think about the identity, because that's the other thing our website needs to call. It needs to go and get that access token in order to be able to use ACS functionality. Now, because of time, I have written this one ahead of time, but it's super simple, so I want to walk you through it. So the first thing is, if you're doing this, if you're stepping through, the first thing you'll need to do is create a communication services instance in Azure. This is the mechanism by which ACS happens for you. So you create a communication services instance in your Azure tenant somewhere. That means that you can now use ACS. You can use Azure Communication Services. There's actually nothing particularly super exciting in here, although you can do all sorts of things that I'm not going to talk about today, like chat and telephony and SMS and stuff. The really important thing is under keys, you have some connection strings, and the connection strings are the mechanism by which code talks to your ACS instance and gets you identities and access tokens that you can then use. And then when you use them, basically for billing, they end up back in here. So this is how you pay as well. So what that means is I've created an Azure Function app so that we can go and have a look at that. And the first thing about that Function app is that I've taken that connection string, that ACS connection string that I just showed you, and I've added it as an application setting right here. Okay. And so what that means is that in my function that I've created called getToken, if I go and show you the code for this, right, look how simple this is. There's like 5 lines and 2 of them are logging. So the first thing we do is we go and get that connection string. So the one I just showed you, we're going to go and get that back. Okay. and we're going to create a new communication identity client. And that's because we're using a package for Azure Communication Identity. Once we've created that client, now there are method calls you can make against this client to generate a user identity, and you can create one to create an access token, but they also have this joint one which creates a user and a token all in one, which is pretty useful. So that's the one we're calling, because we don't really care about creating, like, not creating the users sometimes and reusing them and stuff like that. We're just going to like create it every time and throw it away. So that's the call we're going to use, and we specify some scopes. These are like permissions for the access token that gets created. And for this one, I'm saying I want to be able to do voice over IP and chat because I just don't care. So create me that and then send me back all of that information in a response. So what we can, if I get the function URL for this, we can call this instead now, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so when you call this, now you get back the user. This is this first one, the ID. Again, it's just like this massive string, doesn't really mean anything. Now you could store that if you knew the user that you are making this call for, you could store that in your database against the user and reuse it, or you can just generate a new one every time, like I'm doing. And then you also get a token, and this token is what the UI that we're about to build needs to be able to use in order to access the ACS service. So now we've got all the bits together that we need. We can, from our website, we can make a call to generate the meeting, and we can also make a call to go and get this stuff back as well. So we're in a pretty good place. Let's go back and have a look at our code and see how that is getting on. Okay, so that one has imported fine. There's another one I'm going to add, which is the communication calling library. This one should be quite a bit quicker. And so whilst that's happening, I'm just going to open up this folder that we created, if I can remember what it was called. Teams Nation, I think. Okay, and let's make that terminal again because it's disappeared. I probably should have paid some attention to see whether it actually did that package. I'm going to guess it probably did, but I might just do it again, just in case. All right, perfect. All right, so the main entry point for this app right now is this app.tsx file. And you can see that because it's got this text in it that says edit the code and save to reload. And the image that we saw, that spinning image, is that one. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of this, and let's start kind of from the top. So I am going to copy and paste rather than type, mostly for time, but I want to go through each section. So I'm importing a bunch of things first. So I'm importing a lot from the Azure libraries. You can see things about the tokens, things about call adapters, and some other bits and pieces. And then I'm just importing some React stuff as well. Let's rebuild that app object that we so brutally destroyed just now. And then we need to export it at the other end. So this is sort of a bare bones of what we've got. All right. What should we do next? Okay, let's look at some endpoint URLs. So we need some constants. We need some variables to hold some of these things. And the first one is a reference to the ACS instance we are working against. So if I come and show you in here, this communication services instance has an endpoint here. This is how you reference it. So that what we have there is exactly the same as what we have here. And so that's how the code knows where to go. We have a display name that we're going to use for our user. Now you could inject, if you knew what the user's name was, you can inject it into there. And then we've got three others for a call adapter, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then the user ID and the token that we are going to go and get when we make that call to the Azure function to go and get that stuff, and then also a meeting link as well when we make that call to go and get it. The call adapter is what the UI that we're going to build uses, and it's like contains everything that the UI needs about the whole ACS setup and the call in order to go and make that call. So that's the last thing we're going to create, and then before we pass it to the UI. Okay, we are going to let's just put in some HTML at the end, so the output of this whole function, because there's a bit of logic happening here I just want to step through. So let's start with the end state first, because that's not at all confusing. if we've got the call adapter and it's all set up and it's all ready to go, then we are going to show this call composite. Okay, this call composite, remember I said there were some UI composite controls that ACS had? This is one of them. This is an entire call, like an entire calling experience, and you'll see what that looks like in a minute. And as a parameter, it takes that call adapter thing I was just talking about. And that's the only thing it takes. So that's all it needs basically, is this call adapter to get on and do the call. But in order to get that call adapter, we have to do some work. So if we don't have some things that I haven't created yet, then we're going to show this button to say start the video appointment. And when you click the button to say start the video appointment, we're going to make this function call that we also don't have yet called start appointment. And that is going to kick off the process of making some calls out to our different HTTP endpoints that we've made, and so that we can kind of get going with those. So let's start by adding that start appointment button. So that's this one. So when you click that start video appointment button, we're going to make some HTTP calls. And the first thing we're going to do is make an HTTP call to that PowerShell flow. So I need the URL of this flow. So take the URL of that and let's pop it in here. Big URL, isn't it? We make a post call to that. That's going to give us back the appointment data. If you remember, we made it JSON and we made a thing in there called join link. So now I can set the meeting link. So we've got the meeting link, so we're good. I'm then going to make a call to that Azure function. And again, that's going to give us back the token and the user ID. So that puts us in a good place for getting those, which is nice. Now, once we've got those, I'm going to use a hook in React. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. Basically, it means like when these variables here, specifically these ones, when they change, this code is going to get run again. And actually, I say they change. It's not the credential one that we don't have yet, so ignore it. This use effect thing gets called again when any of these values change. It's this use state thing. So in here, what we're going to say is if we don't have a credential yet, and I haven't created this object yet, so that's why it's all in red still. But if we don't have one of those, then we need one. So if we do have one, sorry, then we're going to create a adapter. So this thing I keep saying that we need, this adapter, this is what we're going to create, because at that point, we will have everything we need. We'll have the user ID, we'll have the display name, we've got the credential, and we know the meeting link. So how do we get this credential? Again, that is just a variable, and we need to set it up. I'm going to use a thing in React called a memo. It's basically like a cache. It's like a cached value, so it'll work it out the first time, and it won't worry about doing it again and again and again and again every time. And so this is going to kind of call itself. It's going to create, and this Azure Communication Token credential is the thing that creates the this credential object that is needed, and it takes in that user access token. So this is going to run once we've got user access token. It's not going to work if we don't get the user access token. It's not going to be able to do anything. So it won't be able to get one. But when it does get one, then it is going to put it into the into this credential object. That then means that this will have a value in it, which means it will go and create the adapter. So there's a few things that will go on there, starting with, going to get this, making this URL call, making this URL call. That gets the values that we need for the user, gets the values that we need for the token, and gets everything going. So I have no idea what's going on down there. I think once we do that, let's have a quick look. We've got a process now where we've got an app that is going to render itself. It will give us a button. When we click the button, it should make that API call. It should create a Teams meeting. It should put a message in the channel. It should give us back the Teams meeting. It should go and get all the access and identity that it needs and give us a nice calling experience. Is any of that going to work? Is all of it going to work? Let's find out. Let's run this code and see what happens. This will be the moment of truth. And if nothing happens, I've got this weird thing going on with I probably should have done this before, because we're thinking with Visual Studio Code, where sometimes, normally after a big import like we've been doing and a load of packages and stuff like that, it just isn't very happy. So what I think I might do is just close this and open it, turn it off and turn it on, and run it again. And actually, whilst I do that, I'm going to just turn my camera off because I want to be able to use it on this web page when it loads. If it ever loads. Come on. Didn't think this would be the bit we'd be waiting around for. Come on, Visual Studio Code, you can do this. If not, I might have to close it and then make a bit more of an attempt at really closing it to see if some weird thing is open somewhere, but I feel like it should be all right. I'm probably maybe just being a bit too impatient with it. Let's get these things next to each other so we can see. Will it, won't it? Will it, won't it? Luckily, we've got a little bit of time to figure out why not. Yeah, I think it probably should have done something by now. Oh, so close. I so nearly closed that, and I'm pretty glad I didn't. Perfect, right? So, gosh, what a roller coaster. Okay, so we've got our button. So that means that the code thinks, actually, I don't have any credentials. I don't have anything. I'm not ready to do this video appointment. But let's click the button. We'll see what happens. If it doesn't immediately change, we can open up the dev tools and start debugging and see what goes on. But let's click that button and see what happens. That's gone to initializing, which is encouraging. This is the UI for that calling composite. If I come over to here, here we go. You can see we've created a new meeting right here. Which is again encouraging. Let's have a think, which way should we do this? Let me start this call first, and I think I'm going to go into the lobby. I would expect to go into the lobby. Now, this is going to be a bit of fun because I'm in a meeting and then also trying to join a meeting. So let's figure out how we do that. Over here, I could take this. I could also, actually, if I go and look at my calendar, you'll see there's a new web meeting we've created here. So let me do that, and I can join this. Now, if I do this, I'm going to probably end up losing you guys. All right, so I don't really want to do that. But if I was to join this meeting, I would get the meeting, I would get into the lobby, I would be able to see this user. What I might try doing is, no, I won't do it on my phone because I'll lose you then as well. This will get you into the meeting. So currently this user is waiting in the lobby, and I've got all these commands because this is entirely built into the application, like to that UI composite control. So I can take the camera, I can set up, I can turn it on, I can do all sorts of things. I can use this, like it's fine. Like what it isn't is customized for your organization and customized for your setup and anything like that. But you could absolutely use this. This will get you into the meeting. You'll show up as a guest user. There's no point then showing you like how Teams works after that. You'll get a participant list. You'll get the sharing screen. You've got all these controls that you can use. This is all running in a web page that we built up. So you could embed this into anything that you have. So let's level set a little bit about what on earth just happened and what we went through. So in the last 20-ish minutes, more like 15 minutes probably, what do? We built up a video portal, starting with nothing, starting with the create app experience, literally nothing. It uses Teams on the back end for our meetings. It uses Teams for scale and security. I'm sorry I couldn't actually join you into the meeting. This is kind of the challenge with remote meetings, right? In a Teams meeting, so you can't be joining a Teams meeting, but I'm hoping if you were to try this for yourself, you can absolutely do it. And I'm hoping you could see I got as far as the lobby. So the next stage after that is like just being in the meeting. But it uses Teams on the back end. So you haven't got to go and build your own platform. You're using that power, that scalability of that 5-year-old platform. But it embeds really nicely into any web page. So you can take that. It's WebRTC. It's not the Teams embed client. It is super scalable. It's skinnable. You can take those UI components and you can make them your own as well. And we used low-code tools. We used Power Automate where we could. We used some fairly lightweight tools around Azure Functions as well. And we did use a bit of code on that last bit with the React code, but it was all fairly generic code. And you can go and get it yourself. There's a link there that gets you that same code that I just showed you. So you can go and get that. So you've got everything you need. I think you should go and try this out because it's really exciting when it works. And so there's also, shameless plug, if you're interested in learning Azure Communication Services a bit more, I've got like a series of blog posts that go through it in quite a lot of detail. So you can go and get that from learnacs.dev. I blog about all this stuff all the time with videos and podcasts and blogs and whatnot. It's quite a fast-paced session, this. So apologies if it's too fast. Go back and review the recording, go back and review the slides, go check through the code. It is a bit of a whistle stop, but I'm really excited that you can take absolutely nothing and get to a web portal, joining a Teams meeting that you've just created in 20 minutes. So whistle stop tour. Hope it's been useful. Reminder about ratings. I'm going to put it on the screen. That QR code will take you somewhere so you can go and do some feedback. That is super useful both for me and also the session organizers because they understand what works and what doesn't. I feel like I've left you maybe 3 minutes for questions. So thanks very much for your time. Thank you for listening and thank you for being a Teams Nation.